so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know you recently took on a new role. So
yes.
Tell us about that.
So I'm currently the Vice President of Marketing at Domino Data Lab, which is a platform for data scientists. Really excited here in San Francisco. Venture-backed startup. Before Domino, I was the VP of Product Marketing at Splunk, where I had been for close to 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Or no, sorry, close to 7 years actually. It was over
wow.
close to 7 years, and that was great. And that was sort of I was in a bunch of different sort of product marketing and solution marketing related roles. My actual first title when I came in was developer marketing, because before Splunk, I was at Microsoft, and I'd been at Microsoft for about 5 years and did, I think Microsoft, again, from a titling standpoint, is a little bit different. I think almost the entire time I had the title product manager, but if you actually think about like the roles and responsibilities, most of what I was doing was actually more traditional product marketing, and sort of product marketing and solutions marketing type work. And that was, that's sort of been the last nice bulk of my career. And then earlier before that, I grew up as a product manager at startups here in San Francisco. But companies that are early enough that like when you're a product manager, it means you kind of do everything except carry a quota and write code. So you're sort of a part-time sales engineer, you're a part-time product marketer, you're a part-time QA person, you're part-time sales enablement. So I think that was sort of what I was doing then, and I began my career way long time ago because I'm super old at Accenture. So long ago it was still called Anderson Consulting. So nobody remembers that.
No, I think back when Tiger Woods maybe was still the face.
Yeah, Tiger Woods was still the face. And then I remember people were really bummed out. I left right when the name changed. And I remember it was like a contest or something about like, because there was Arthur Anderson Consulting and then Anderson Consulting, and we got Accenture, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then even though Accenture continued to like sponsor the golf events and stuff, people for like 2 years still thanked Anderson.
Oh.
People were like, ugh. But so that was super long time ago. But yeah, that's kind of the Jon Rooney origin story.
So little, maybe not so well kept secret. I actually interned at Accenture as part of the brand marketing team, and the reason it got called Accenture is because, to your point, it was a contest, and someone submitted Extend into the future.
Yes.
Accenture, right? So.
And the thing I remember about that name, like that's the thing, like just the serendipity of this sort of naming and branding. I was kind of bummed out because I had moved here already at this point and was working at startups, and I was like, God, Anderson is such a better brand and a better name, and like Accenture, that's kind of weird. And then Enron happened, Enron and Arthur Anderson went down, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, I have Accenture. I was like, oh, no, I worked at Accenture now. So, like, those are one of the things you can't control, and stuff just happens,
Well, speaking of careers, you mentioned you've had, sounds like, multiple roles, different titles, somewhat overlap of actual function, and now obviously leading an entire function. Tell me a little about, like, at large companies like Microsoft and at smaller companies, what's the difference between product marketing, developer marketing, solution marketing, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some, in many cases, I think it's a simple way to look at it is, are you deciding what to build? If you're deciding what to build and develop, then by and large, you're doing product management work, right? And I was really clear at Splunk, and certainly here at Domino, in keeping those lanes separate. Like it was never really been my job, or has been at various times, but by and large from a traditional, whether you call it solutions marketing, and solutions marketing is more if you want to align less to individual SKUs and say more, oh, we want to appeal to verticals. So if you're doing financial services solutions marketing and you have kind of a platform or something that can be applied to different areas, you want to have a title that applies more to an industry or audience view. Same with developer marketing. That's the idea that, okay, you speak the language of developers, and you go to these shows, and you follow these people on Twitter, and you get to wear a hoodie every day. Like all this stuff that's sort of aligned with that. But at the end of the day, if you're not deciding what to build, you're deciding how to talk about the value of your company and what you understand what problems your customers have, and you can articulate, oh, you have this headache. Let me tell you about our aspirin. Well, first of all, let me empathize with that headache. Let me make sure we understand the headache and how this headache is different from that headache. But then ultimately, again, it's about surfacing. Here's the story. Here's the messaging, and then in terms of the full list of responsibilities. That's really how I think about it. Sort of like decide what to build, decide how to talk about it and bring it to marketing, to bring it to market. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Absolutely. So when you are hiring, say, for a product marketer versus a solutions marketer versus I think you use the word industry marketing versus I've even seen like technical product marketer as a title.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the skill sets that are different in terms of like what you're looking for and what exactly the role requires day to day?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of those roles that definitely anchor in a certain amount of expertise, and it sort of feels like, what is the non-negotiable anchor of expertise? And so when I've hired kind of solution marketing or industry marketing people before, the idea is where's their expertise based in, and if it happens to be, they know financial services really well, and they understand the systems and the processes, and they know all the players, and they know the competitive landscape, and they know the bit of the history of financial services. That makes them valuable for that segment. And then everything else becomes, that becomes the primary thing you focus on. Technical product marketing, there's an amazing technical product marketing team at Splunk, and I hired a lot of those folks. And there, you tend to take people out that were practitioners. So. I've spent most of my career in enterprise software, so it's tends to be very technical products for technical users, and the technical product marketing role is such that you have probably a similar skill set or similar background to become a sales engineer, maybe even a little bit to have the empathetic side of being a product manager, but the way I used to describe it is your job is to tell the story through the product. So if you're in traditional product marketing, you tell the story through customer stories or through visualizations or narrative or these other places you tell the story of here's who we are and here's what we matter.
Yeah.
I think the primary focus of technical product marketers is tell the story through the product, and that's when you think about like really compelling, there's a difference between kind of the big stage demos, the demos that are shown at Moscone and in Vegas, and none of those are real. Most of them are lovingly show business. And then what is the canonical demo that every sales engineer brings to customers as part of the sales cycle? What is the sort of blessed path that we say, here's how we show all this stuff in our product. So that skill set, you tend to find people who were in the seat, who've done the work, who knows, knows what the other competing products are like, and knows and can understand and empathize with what the day-to-day is. But they're responsible for telling the story through product versus through all the other ways.
So it's actually a natural segue to a lot of questions that I hear, which is, hey, I don't have product marketing on my resume, or I'm a career switcher. I'm currently someone in FinServ, or I'm currently a database or engineer even, how do I get into this function? Sounds like there is some value in having skills outside of quote unquote traditional product marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no, I think historically, certainly in West Coast or Silicon Valley tech companies, I think there's been a historical path that has been somewhat standard that I think is limited in a lot of ways. And that path tends to be somebody with a computer science or engineering background who wrote some code, became a product manager, and then sort of wants to flip over. There's value in that because you have technical domain knowledge, but at the end of the day, it's a marketing role. And I think all marketing roles, we're all responsible, they're all comms roles, we're all communicators. And so I think that one thing that I've certainly looked at in recruiting and hiring, and especially like environments like this in the Bay Area now, and how competitive and how tight the job market is I think that there are ways to find people who can be immensely effective and successful and happy as product marketers who don't necessarily come from that background. And I think that there are other skills that you can identify in terms of communicating value, dealing with ambiguity, working across stakeholders, the ability to pick up and learn things quickly, which I think is immensely valuable. And I think people confuse or maybe conflate the requirement around having a feel or understanding of technology versus having the technical depth necessary to sort of architect and build it. You're really overdoing it. If you consider that a requirement from a product marketing standpoint, and I think you miss out on the communication stuff. There are lots of people who know stuff. The job of a product marketer is not to know stuff necessarily. The knowledge is an input, it's not an output. And then the output is always communicate this in a way that people can understand. Like, who are your customers? What's the, I always sort of feel like the pyramid from product marketing standpoint is, can you pitch it to business press, and can you sit in a 4-hour briefing with an analyst who came from a practitioner role and dig it out, and do that full kind of the full gamut of explanations. And in none of those cases do you actually have to get in there and be an engineer. Coming from engineering doesn't preclude people by any means, but I think that the talent pool around product marketing, I think, has been traditionally too limited by that. So people who've come from inside sales or sales roles where they've had to communicate the value, and then sort of figures out where you need to bolster. People who've come from kind of traditional, I'd say, like content marketing or writing roles. I think that because they've had to communicate the things, even if they felt like they haven't had the grounding in, well, I don't quite have it under my fingernails of like exactly what I'm writing about. That's an easier bridge to pass. I've been really successful, and I know that there are probably partners at a couple of consulting firms who hate my guts because of it. I've hired a lot of people away from consulting. Yeah,
I was going to say, ex-consultants are a big pool of product marketers. Huh?
And I think it's an arbitrage opportunity, because I know, I think, and I think people on the consulting side, and I even sort of remember this when I started out in consulting. I was like, well, how do you jump into industry? How do you, because you think it's sort of this barrier that like, oh, I just do this totally different thing. But if you actually decompose the skill set in terms of being able to pick up things quickly, build consensus across teams who often don't even really like you very much. I mean, I remember going on client sites early on, and I was a kid, and you could tell like these people do not want to help my document get done, but you got to figure out a way to make it work, and that flexibility and be able to sort of condense it down to like, what are the big animal pictures, like what are the big bullet points. I think those are all backgrounds. So I'm really excited. I think there are a couple of companies that have really elevated the role of product marketing in an organization. And yeah, I mean, I know just from my recent, kind of my recent transition into the new role at Domino that like, it's hard to find good product marketing people. So it's good for customers, it's good for the industry. So let's get more people into it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, to your point about ex-consultants, you also learn how to make beautiful decks and convey stories relatively quickly, right? So a skill that I feel like in product marketing we're constantly using decks to tell our story.
I know. At least we've progressed beyond the chevrons. I feel like there was about a decade there that everything was communicated in chevrons, and it's really nice that we've expanded our visual vocabulary a bit.
Absolutely. So for people who've been in product marketing, say 1 to 5 years, there's all these new, as we talked about earlier, titles, right?
Yeah.
It's technical, segment lead, inbound, etc. Number one, like, how do I know what's the right quote direction for me to double down and bet my career on? And then a two-parter to this question is someone who has done the product management role, now the product marketing led that function, and now leads all of marketing. Yeah. Like, where does a career in product marketing look like? Like, tell me about the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I always thought about it and I do think career planning is super important, and the first kind of bit of advice is, remember, like, you care about your career more than anyone else does, but also make sure you end up in a place where people also care about your career. So I've always felt that career planning was an important thing, and one of the things that you should ask yourself, and I would always ask people on the team, is what do you want to do ultimately? And it might be a bit of a simplification, but at least amongst all the product marketing folks that I've worked with, it's sort of one of two paths. You're either on a CMO path, or you're on sort of a general manager path. And if you're on a general manager path, and you're only going to do one role in marketing, product marketing is probably the best role to take. Because you're at the hub of everything. And it's funny, again, some of it has to be in enterprise software, but every CMO that I've worked for has grown up out of product marketing. Because at the end of the day, it's a very technical product, right? And you have to have some appreciation for what does it take to build a thing. But you still have exposure to a bunch of other things. I'm learning this in my new role now. It's like, oh, well, I knew a lot more about analyst relations than I thought I did, because I did a ton of briefings as a PMM. or I knew a lot more about PR. From a branding standpoint, it doesn't mean that I necessarily have all the creative chops to get there, but I sort of understand the consideration points.
Yeah.
And so I think it gives you the most exposure to the functions across everything in marketing, every campaign execution. Often, you may be involved in product planning, even if it's just sort of to be informed. So I would say that there's the GM path. Again, if you're going to do one role in marketing, but what you ultimately want to do is run a line of business or even be a CEO, I would recommend PMM is the way to do that. If you're thinking more along the CMO role, which is sort of the path that I've been on now to sort of take over all of marketing, what it does is sort of lets you pivot, again, to see all those functions and then to think about all right, do I want to make sure that I have experience working with field marketing, right? Working more closely on the go-to-market side, right? Because I think there's such a trend now toward having outbound demand gen, integrated go-to-markets. Yeah. There's sort of the trend of the new sort of president role where customer success and marketing and sales report into, and it's sort of an integrated thing, and you have this sort of Salesforce box 4 horseman model. So you have exposure to all those things, which I think is really helpful and important. But at the same time, in product marketing, there's also this sort of other kind of refreshing, I think, return to the narrative and storytelling part, which is a lot of the category creation work, right? Where at the end of the day, it's like what is the story of this company? What are you doing that's different from other companies? It's not as tactical or not as execution based. That forces you to think a little bit. Is a little bit more creative. And in that case, you get much more exposure from in product marketing, even than maybe you would have done 5 years ago, into things like corporate messaging, corporate narrative, and then when you actually get down to the tactics of creating and defining a category. So all of those things. I mean, those are the two paths. I mean, obviously, I imagine from an engineering, and there have been people that have come through, especially in the technical product marketing roles, that's the only marketing role they ever want to have because they want to become an engineering or a product leader,
right?
And they want to at least have an empathy of what does marketing do again? It's funny, we had an all hands at Domino on Tuesday, and I kind of it was my first 90 days. Wow. So I gave kind of impressions of my first 90 days, and then there was a question that was put out by someone on the team about what does marketing measure itself in, which I think is a nice way of saying what does marketing do again?
Exactly.
And so I kind of put together how do I do that in 10 minutes, and it's just really clear about how do you think about awareness, how do you think about demand, what are some of the ways you measure, and then what are we doing within the confines of sort of the company, the stage we're in now, and that in that way, again, I think product marketing is a good way to focus. But again, if you feel as if, hey, at the end of the day, I'm a marketer at heart, and I want to run marketing or build a marketing organization somewhere, it gives you pretty close exposure to all of those other functions. Again, I think if you're out in just doing campaign execution or just doing field marketing, you might be a little removed from some of the other pieces.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that you've now gone through a hiring, I'm going to call it a cohort of product marketers at Domino. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For all of the VPs of product marketing, because we get so much inbound from directors and hiring managers saying, Shyna, where is the talent, right? Yeah. It's not like you can go get a degree in product marketing. So what advice do you have for hiring managers or function leaders for your peers of where to go and find really great product marketing talent, but also just marketing talent in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pool of available existing product marketers is much smaller than you'd expect it to be. So I think start thinking about what are the characteristics and the skills you want, much more so than title. And so I think we're a relatively small but growing super fast company. Hired 2 product marketers who just started a couple weeks ago. One had done product marketing before, and one had not.
Wow.
And so and that's okay. And I've hired some of the most effective, most successful folks that have ever worked for me in product marketing. That was the first product marketing role. And I think ultimately that is your responsibility as a product marketing leader, is how do you create an environment, build a team, and be really clear about sort of what are the roles and responsibilities such that you can bring people in that have the ability, the communication ability, the ability to build consensus across teams to sit in and be effective. Now there's certain things like when you hire in more senior level, like if you don't, in my world, you kind of have to know the whole analyst game and like, oh, here's who's at Gartner and here's who's at Forrester and here's what 451 is doing. That's a lot to ask for someone who's coming in newly and functional. But if what you're really trying to do is create a bunch of assets to help during the sales cycle, or up-level the messaging to sort of get it out of technical documentation, you can pull from a lot of different places from that. So I think being much more open about that and clear on like exactly what are the needs of the organization today. Is it around pattern match from a sales enablement standpoint to say, oh, here's what tends to be the sales cycle, and here's what we need to give people, reps and SEs at this stage versus that stage, or you're just communicating who you are to the market beyond technical architecture, which is a big phase that I think a lot of startups go through.
Yeah, so it sounds like just being very conscious of what you're looking for, but also being very conscious of what you're, willing to quote unquote give up in hiring for that role. To your point, someone who's content focused versus technical, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, and be really honest with yourself about for let's say some of the background that maybe a candidate or someone coming in wouldn't have. Can you either support it? Can you help build it in that person, or organizationally, is it something that you can live without for the near term?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, John, I think one thing in the Bay Area, as you know, Peter Thiel is a big believer of is this whole contrarian theory, right? Like, what is it that you believe that no one else believes? So I'm going to ask you that, and let's expand it beyond just product marketing to marketing. Like, what's a belief that you hold to be very true, and maybe it's been something that you followed for your own success, or you take into every job that maybe is not so well held and popular amongst other marketers or product marketers?
I mean, I would say the product marketing thing, and it's funny because I've had to fight for hires through the years on this, but I can take someone who is smart and motivated and a good communicator, and I can teach them technical things much easier than I can take someone who has technical depth and teach them how to communicate. By the time that they're in the workforce, you're not going to learn to read and write. But I can teach you about infrastructure monitoring, or I can teach you about data science lifecycle.
Hard skills.
Yeah, I mean, so and so I think that those are the things that become a little bit undervalued. People, and I mean, I'm not saying this because I have a degree in literature. Like, there's a reason liberal arts degrees exist, right? And I think if the ability to articulate and process things in abstraction and work through them, like, it can be applied across multiple things. Had I graduated with a computer science degree at my age, everything I've learned would be wildly out of date. So I would say that the contrarian view is market in the title product marketing, anchor on marketing, not product. And so I think that's, at the end of the day, that's our job.
And for someone who, say, didn't have a liberal arts degree, or for someone who is, in the workforce today and wants to work or invest in their communication skills, what advice do you have for them in order to level up?
Read, write, blog, tweet, create little videos. Like, the one nice thing at a certain point, I guess it happened like 2 or 3 years ago, especially in like slightly more senior candidates. I could go on YouTube and find someone presenting at a conference, like, get up there and present, explain something to somebody. I used to do, when I was at Microsoft, I used to do on-campus recruiting for undergraduate interns for product marketing. So nobody, and I literally would just be like, basically my question would be like, tell me something you like. And it would be like something like, I remember the exact question it would be, tell me some sort of campaign or rebranding or something, like, and please don't talk about software, enterprise software, because you're in college and I hope you don't care that much about enterprise software. But like, get me excited about something that you like and explain it to me in a way that I don't really understand. And if you can do that, you can apply that to online storage or any other array of technical topics. So like, if you can do that to one thing, that can be much more easily applied than sort of deep technical domain.
Absolutely. funny. I remember during my Microsoft internship interview, the recruiter had asked me, explain the internet to my grandmother. So very similar to exactly what you're saying. Take something relatively complex and put it in simple storytelling terms to someone who...
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just ask, I remember the best answer I ever got, I don't think he ended up coming to Microsoft. He talked to this whole thing about how Burberry had rebranded itself and what they'd done from distributor stuff and how they... It was one of the stories that, like, A, he was passionate about, but B, like the answer, like, it checked all the boxes. Like, it was a very, like, I bought it at the end of it. I came in, didn't know anything about it, didn't particularly care very much about it, and I left, I was like, oh, I get this, and I care, and, like, that's the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If people have questions or anything else, what's your Twitter handle? And if you're hiring at Domino Labs, feel free to have a commercial. Yeah,
we are hiring at Domino Data Lab, so we're helping the world run on models, so please come and come to the website. And you always feel free to reach out to me or follow me on Twitter. I sort of rejoined Twitter kind of late, so my count is not great. Do not judge me on that. I could always
They're real people, not bots.
I know, but they're real people, all of them. It's at Rooney Thesis, one word, and yeah, it's some fun Twitter.
Awesome. Thanks, Jon.
Thanks very much.